spent 12 years working on the line at General Products. Sometimes I thought I'd never get that cottage, that retirement that I'd been dreaming of. Then my old ship's supervisor, Maximilian Carrick, passed away and found out he left everything he had to me. Must have done him a salad when I picked up all his shifts when his wife had cancer. Well, in any case, now I find myself owning quarter of a ship, merchant ship that he had retired himself into, also owning the mortgage on it. So I guess I better be learning how to be a traveler. It's the closest thing to retirement that I was ever going to get to.
After 8 years working at the Waktueo Corporation, I found myself in good stead with many of its elder sisters. At the same time, I found myself courted by a young prince of the Echwan clan. I did not take kindly to his advances, however. He was crass and without honor, and fought many duels. So I took my retirement package, my dowry, if you will, and I invested it for myself. I intend to become wealthy within imperial space, for I am a queen of commerce. Being an enlisted man in the Navy is not all it's cracked up to be. You know, you spend a lot of time in jump space and you spend a lot of time with your hands getting really dirty. But sometimes a few things fall off a truck. Somebody has need of those things falling off. Or maybe you hear tell of some salvage that one of your buddies who was flying in a boat happened to see. And you work a couple salvage jobs and you find your way above a certain moon and you happen to have the expertise to refurbish a derelict. And of course, you also happen to find yourself in more than a little bit of debt because you had to buy a couple parts to get it flying again. But now you're the captain. You never thought that would happen, senior petty officer. I hope I know what I'm doing. There's one question in Traveler character creation that I think a lot of groups will need to answer as they enter play, which is, how'd you get your ship shares? What is this vessel that you rolled as a mustering out benefit? How did you come by it? And what's the backstory? Your character's got the ship, or possibly just, owns the mortgage on it and all the liability. And how did that happen? What did they do to earn it? Because there's a number of careers where this is sort of a surprise when it lands in your lap. And I think that this is a place where some really kind of critical thinking can yield a lot of really interesting gameplay and a lot of cool frames to begin your campaign within. Within the framework of Mongoose Second Edition Traveller, this may come down to talking about it in session 0 and doing a little bit of bird's eye view sort of story crafting with your fellow players. Wouldn't it be cool if we all chipped in together to salvage this ship, for example? Or I called you in, you're my friend, when we salvaged this ship, and now we happen to be together, and I gave you some equity in it. Or it could be that one of the player characters did this with an NPC who was out there until that NPC perished. And it could be that you find yourself sort of holding the note as someone else has passed on, or maybe just found themselves in jail. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. What about the person's dependents? What about that person's former connections and business contacts and obligations? Now, they're not yours. They're not disadvantages that you rolled or that you're stuck with on your character sheet. They are really kind of flavorings to the story. They're things that you can back away from as a character, and there's nothing binding about them. But this is massive prompt around the ship share that I think is really worth exploring, and the different kinds of ship shares and where they come from, which kind of careers can get them. So let's delve into that a little bit deeper. I'm the Complex Games apologist, and I am going out of town next week, so the videos might be a little thin for a little while here. But let's get started. The number one career in Mongoose Second Edition where you can get ship shares is the agent. Now, law enforcement agencies have a tendency to seize people's property when they're suspected of a crime. Literally, the evidence room. It could be that a criminal, in exchange for, finding their way out of jail or you providing favorable testimony, might just have given you a tip about where there was a vessel that someone in the middle of committing a crime might be found. It could be that you happen to know when the evidence room auction was, and very few other people did. And so when it came time for you to retire, you placed a few bids using your nest egg, and you happened to find a ship in your lap. That would be a legitimate way to earn it. There's some other interesting prospects as well. Now, one of them is that intelligence agencies and corporate intelligence agencies, respectively, often have dark or black assets. Air America was, after all, an airline that the CIA started during the conflict in Southeast Asia in order to kind of insert supplies and personnel into Southeast Asian countries without appearing to be the action of the American government. Now, what happened to those planes when the conflict in Southeast Asia was concluded? No, I bet you that some people managed to find themselves with the deed to them. Some of those people may have been the same agents that were involved in those operations. Now they need to hire a pilot, perhaps one of the fellow travelers in the player character party. Likewise, what if you were a corporate intelligence agent? What if you're the sort of person that was rooting out information leaks within your company or otherwise seeing to it that the executive echelon behaved themselves? What happens when one of them misbehaved? Well, perhaps their yacht or their, private jet, if you will, is the sort of thing that you might find your way into. And with all that expertise working around in the back channels, maybe you can find yourself into some good money using that new ship. That's the kind of question and answer that landing on ship shares can bring about within your traveler game. And so I think it's worth exploring. Let's continue. At the beginning of this video, one of the vignettes was for that line worker. Now the question is, if you work in a union and you find yourself alongside one another and often fighting the hard fight, could be that you also find yourself with a lot of friends outside of your immediate family. It could be that you find yourself into an inheritance that doesn't have anything to do with family ties. It could be a real surprise. After all, a lot of the skills around the citizen career don't have a lot to do with space travel. So that's just one of the answers to that question. But there are a number of other interesting ones. Of course, the corporate career within Citizen could be a matter where there was the private jet and you bought your way into it, or as part of a retirement package, possibly a forced retirement as the corporation came under new ownership, you flew out of there. This is one thing that happens, is that a lot of assets get determined to be redundant when two corporations merge. And when that happens, those assets are sold off, often at cents on the dollar. And the people who are in the right place at the right time often get to walk away with them. And a lot of that stuff turns into scrap metal. But what if it didn't? After all, one of the questions as you muster out of careers and you decide not to start a second career as a traveler is, why are you done in this career? The question is only sometimes that you feel satisfied. Sometimes it's that you just don't want to go back into civilian life and keep hustling and trying to make your way. And so you're ready to turn into a rolling stone out there in space. What if that was because of a corporate merger? And the final specialty of the citizen career is colonist. And now this one, I think it's a little bit more obvious. It could be that you really are earnestly starting a colony enterprise. You are interested in kind of gathering up investors and hopeful people from your community that want to emigrate. And they need someone to be running the starship that's going to facilitate people getting out of this bad situation in this country whose economy is winding down, to find a newer and more hopeful spot. Maybe you're the sort of person who's going to be the one operating the ship. Could also be that a colony enterprise failed. And now that that enterprise, starting this new little dome city on a marginally inhabitable world, is through with, you're left holding the ship and possibly the debt associated with it. Time to make the best of it. When it comes to the drifter career, the barbarian probably found whatever ship shares he has when he stumbled across a lost starship that had crashed on a planet in the wilderness that he's living in. If it comes to the wanderer, he's a space bum, and maybe he was in the right place at the right time. Another one of those Oliver Twist style stories. And for scavengers, it's right there in the title. You've probably escaped a life of being on a salvage crew or a belter by finding some sort of ship that's out there, or having one land in your lap because whoever you were working for died suddenly. Interestingly, the entertainer career, which can include kind of conventional performing artists as well as journalists and artists that may use physical media or like to take pictures, is one place where you will land on two ship shares or none at all. And it's interesting to think that a lot of film productions, a lot of journalistic endeavors could fold up, and there's this redundant asset that you may find yourself holding. It could also be that you tried to make a movie and it didn't work out for one reason or another, a documentary film perhaps. Or perhaps your character is actually undertaking this as play begins, and it's more of a focused campaign about this undertaking and maybe looking for investors as a part of play in order to make this happen. An investigative style game, which includes a journalist trying to uncover some secret about what happened to the Psionic Institute of Mora when it went underground, well, could be a matter for this person who's got literally half of this ship paid off. Now, the merchant career, it may be a little more obvious how you came by these shares. It could be that you mustered out of a larger merchant corporation like Tukira Lines and found one of their older assets that you were able to pick up and refurbish. It can be that a planetary government has just simply hired and provided equity to an experienced trader. And so you have a subsidized merchant of sorts coming from that origin. Or it could be that you've bought out the previous skipper and you really are the captain of a free trader, because many of the results just hand that out on a platter. One of the more challenging avenues to answer this question is with Navy personnel, especially if they don't end up with a commission. How is it that this is possible? And one of the answers that I have is that the Navy often looks in crooks and crannies in the outsystems of places. They often are the people who may be responding to ships that have misjumped and providing the rescue to them. And after all, they are the ones who fight interstellar wars and pirates. Pirate ships go someplace. Maybe those pirate ships happen to go into the hands of sailors who are mustering out. It could be that those pirate ships, after they are refurbished and put into honest to goodness shape and given a new registry because there's a veteran of the Imperial Navy who's registering it, could have come from less than honest origins. But it might be that you have the best intention to really make this old hull into something which is going to help the universe. The noble career in Traveler is notorious for being the sort of person who's often inconvenient for their family, and that's exactly why they are out traveling, is because it would not be good for them to be making whatever enterprises their family is engaged in less reputable with their presence. It could be that you're also just a philanthropic person who's actually interested in whatever sort of special causes are important to you, be that the welfare of the indigenous inhabitants of the world that's coming to be known as Danuli. It could be that you're very concerned about antiquities from the long night and old Earth, and you would like to make sure that they're collected and find their way into a museum. These are the sorts of things that people with lots of money and time on their hands can do. And it is a lot of time that people have on their hands in the Traveler universe. After all, you have to spend literally 7 days in jump space to get anywhere at all. And who better to have a lot of time on their hands than the fantastically wealthy? The noble career is the source for the ships that are called yachts, which often become passenger transports for people who are looking to make a quick getaway or be inserted in a covert fashion into whatever place they're trying to get to. It's often a matter of having a charter vessel. That's how the ship will end up taking up its role within a traveler campaign. Now, where did it come from? Well, maybe it's your uncle's, and your uncle is no longer pursuing a traveling lifestyle because he finally came into the inheritance as the Baron of Rylanor. These are questions, and they have answers. It pays to ask them and to meditate upon them as you roll them and possibly before, because you'll have them at the tip of your tongue when you're ready to begin a traveler campaign. Career number 10 in Mongoose 2 is the Rogue, which includes pirates, it includes mafioso types, and it does include thugs. These are the sorts of people that definitely find their way into owning these ships. It is not so long ago that people were operating private planes and flying them into small airports into the United States of America in order to make deliveries of white powder. Is that the sort of activity that your character was involved in? Or maybe they just came by these ship shares as a foreclosure on a loan sharking sort of operation. And it could be that there's some backhand dealing and someone was only able to pay a debt by reminding someone of where a particular derelict or salvage opportunity lay. Now, that salvage opportunity has become your chance to make an honest living. It's a big universe in Traveler, and there's a lot to be discovered on its individual planets, all the various minor alien races. The biology is unique to all of these planets with breathable air and photosynthetic life, after all. And then there's all the language and the culture and the deep history and past that has come before that some people are very interested in uncovering and understanding. Scholars are people who may find their way into owning these vessels just purely for the purpose of science. This may be a matter of a Jacques Cousteau type of person. It could be a matter of a Bob Ballard or even a James Cameron type who's really honestly trying to make discoveries using spacecraft. And you may need some little bit of help along the way because you're pushing your way into spaces where doors are often closed by international relations or the peril of piracy, and you need to like a little bit of money on the side in order to keep things afloat. And that's where the other travelers might come into play. Now, the simple bedrock that a lot of traveler campaigns might rest upon, and is tried and true, and frankly, it's what we're using right now in our own actual play of Traveler, that you can watch here on the channel, is the detached duty scout ship. The Imperial Interstellar Scout Service makes so many Suleiman-class scouts. They're little tiny versions of the wedge shape of a Star Destroyer, and they make so many of them. They're like the Jeep of interstellar space that they often don't know what to do with them besides hand them to people who are leaving the scout service and say, take good care of her, and if we need you, we'll give you a call. These detached duty scouts who remain with the service in name only are left to fend for themselves and use a lot of their knowledge of space and of the planets on the frontier that they know to maybe get by and make a buck. Because an interesting point of fact is that scouts do not provide a pension. So with that in mind, the knowledge that you earn among the stars with the scouts, it has to be its own reward, or it has to be made rewarding when you get your hands on a scout. Traveler is going to ask you these questions in rapid fire succession as you roll up your characters and begin your campaign. It could be that a character has perished from the very lethal combat and a new character is coming into the session. And these questions are going to be before you in a really rapid fashion where you might need to come up with the answer pretty fast. And so it pays to sleep on these things. It pays to maybe hear somebody talk about it and brainstorm, as I have just done for you. And I find these sorts of cognitive exercises to be a great opportunity for world building, for better understanding the canvas of the Third Imperium and all of the great opportunities for adventure. What are the pushes and pulls upon someone who has a starship? What do they want to do with it? After all, they've been left holding it. What do you want to do? What are you going to do? Let's go traveling. If you enjoyed this video, then why don't you smash that like button and consider perhaps ringing the bell icon, because I hear that has something to do with videos becoming more viral in the eyes of the robot. And in that way, we can grow the channel, more people can see the videos, and with that, I can start making more of them and devoting more time to the channel. Because I do like these times that we have together. And so it is that I hope that you're having a great time with your gaming friends and fellow space travelers. Adieu.